Welcome to MSL Talk with Tom Caravela, a podcast specifically designed for MSLs and all things field medical. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. My guest today is Anthony Greco. He's talent acquisition lead at Bristol Myers Squibb, and we talk about job offers and how to handle them and what you can expect. And it's a great conversation. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and Instagram and LinkedIn, and also MSL Talk Live on Clubhouse, which is the first Tuesday of every month at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So thanks for joining us. Hey Anthony, thanks for joining me. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good, Tom. Thanks for having me. This is pretty funny, I think, once we get into the details of why I'm here, right? And how full circle this is. It's
so full circle. Well, no, let's start with that. I mean, I think what I want everybody to know is that, first of all, Anthony Greco is one of my favorite people on the planet. He's awesome, and he's really, really super good at what he does, so that you guys are in for a treat. But so Anthony and I used to work together. And we worked actually in the same office. Now, Anthony didn't work for me, but I shared office space with another recruitment firm, and Anthony worked for that recruitment firm. So we actually worked together in the same office for, I don't know how long it was. It was a long time ago, but it was for a blip, and we got to know each other, and we've kept in touch. And I've been begging him to come on, and we're lucky to have him. So thank you for joining us.
You got it. Yeah, it was really funny how this all transpired, but long story short, I started an agency recruitment, shared an office with Tom for the agency I worked for. And then when I went out on my own, eventually, some of the first work I did was in the MSL world. And the only reason I had any chance of being successful in that space is because I learned it from Tom's agency and just overhearing conversations. And that was pure coincidence how I got introduced to the MSL world when I was working on my own. So I actually have to thank you for some of the success I've had here, because it honestly started there when it came to pharma, and that's how I got into pharma. So
that's so funny. Yeah, it all comes back to the MSL, and that's why we're here. And it is really uncanny. It was just happenstance. It just kind of developed that way. But congrats on all your success, and you know, I've been following your career, obviously, and I'm really happy to see. So tell everybody where you're at now. So you are working in-house right now, correct?
Correct. I'm an in-house field commercial lead actually right now for Bristol Myers Squibb for our acquisition group. So I started years ago at Celgene, was a contract recruiter there, was full-time eventually after about a year, was heavy in field medical affairs. So that's why they brought me in. They were doing a bunch of expansions at the time. I was supporting them as an agency, which was really myself at the time, and had some success, came in-house there. And then eventually, of course, we were acquired by Bristol Myers Squibb. During that transition, I went heavy into commercial. And then ever since I became our field lead, I actually don't cover medical affairs at the moment. My team isn't responsible for that. We have a medical team. However, a majority of my time in pharmaceuticals has been spent in field medical. So have seen quite a lot.
I know you have. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation and talk about job offers is because I get so many requests and there's so many questions that come about. And I really do believe that people don't truly know the ins and outs and what to expect when it comes to job offers. So I figured let's have this conversation. And I'm glad that, you know, I wanted somebody on the HR side that has the experience, that knows. So let's jump right into it and let's talk about it. So I guess the first thing is, what should people expect? So you have somebody they're on the job market and they're interviewing, and now they find out they're going to get an offer. So what should they expect? What should be in the offer? Who presents the offer? If you can walk us through that initial part of it, that'd be great.
Sure. So I think the most important thing to point out is on the legal side of things, right? And some of the stuff that's transpired when it comes to offers across the United States. Now, not all states have these restrictions for recruiters, but I would just tell anybody watching to make sure you're aware of the laws within your state. you should not be asked for your current compensation in many of the states now. And
Yep.
that is increasing across the country. Many companies have blanketed that policy. I know we have. So no one should be asking you for current comp. The reason being, the process of evaluating an offer and presenting an offer, it should all be done based off of your experience and your skill set. So that's number one. I would say it's a red flag if anyone is asking you for that information, if you reside in a state where those laws are. When it comes to the actual offer process, I would say you really should be asking as many questions as you possibly can, and negotiating as much as you can to a reasonable extent, right? And laying it all out on the table, I think, is really helpful, not only at the offer stage, but even before then. The more you can tell a recruiter and or the hiring manager about your current situation up front is going to only help in the end, right? The last thing you want to do is bombard them with something very late in the process that may have been able to have been worked through during the entire interview process, right? Because many things on the HR side do take time to work out. Sometimes they have to get an exception to one of their policies. And so I think just being transparent is sort of the best rule or guidance I can give.
And when you say be transparent, what you're saying is put it out there and communicate, because I'm a big advocate in communication and transparency, especially at the job offer stage. If you can very tactfully put out there what your expectations are, what you're looking to see happen, I think it just makes the discussions a lot easier because there's no game playing. There's no guessing. It's like, okay, I'm a candidate. I'm interviewing for this position. I'm interested. I really want the job. But here's what I'd like to see happen. Is that what you're saying?
100%. I think communication, transparency will enable you to get to a place much quicker where everyone is comfortable and everyone knows the expectations, right? So, for example, if you've had a conversation with a recruiter 3 weeks before you got the offer about your expectations, maybe they pushed back on it and they were able to set proper expectations, or maybe you're both on the same page, but at least when you get to the offer stage, you have a general sense of what to expect. And that's why I was saying, you just don't want to be bombarded with something as a candidate late in the process. And on the recruiter and the company side, they also don't want to be bombarded. So, to your point, the communication is really, really key.
Well, and it leads me to one of the questions I was going to ask, and it was going to be like, literally, it was going to be my first question, because I hear this all the time. I heard it today. We had somebody who was getting an offer, and I heard this again today, and I was prepared to ask this like weeks ago when you and I first started doing this. I hear all the time, well, they always say, don't accept the first offer that comes along, right? Talk about that for me.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? And I think sometimes there's guidance out there that isn't exactly the best advice. I've had many offers be accepted at that first initial offer because we've had those conversations up front, right? Both parties know exactly what it's going to take. Everyone's comfortable with it. And perhaps an offer is presented that the candidate is 100% comfortable with, and perhaps it even matches exactly what they asked for, right? So I think why that is not the best advice is because you have a reputation, right, as a candidate. You want to go in on the right foot with your employer. And if you've asked for something very specific and you're saying, this is my ideal situation, and they come back with that exact salary that you were looking for, and then you go back and negotiate just because you think it's the right thing to do, or
because someone told you never accept the first offer.
Right. And because someone gave you that guidance, it's not a good look, and not to say that anyone's going to rescind an offer because you asked the question, but depending on what the prior conversations were, it may make them feel a bit different about you,
Sure.
Right? That is just human nature. So, it's just not getting greedy, but if you set the proper expectations up front and they're offering that to you, I think it's totally fine to accept the first offer if you're comfortable with it.
And again, it goes back to, if you have real good dialogue, communication, transparency, everything's out there. When the offer does come in, it's what you want and what the expectation is. It takes the guesswork out of it. There is no need to. You already preloaded the situation by doing the negotiation. So if you're going to negotiate on top of that negotiation, you're just going to really make a bad impression, and no one wants that.
That's right. And, you know, I think there is also this tendency for candidates to think that you never discuss compensation prior to an offer stage, and that it's premature if a recruiter is asking you up front. In my eyes, that's actually the best practice, right? And sometimes candidates will think that a company might be getting ahead of themselves by having that discussion too early. But I think you're saving yourself a lot of headaches potentially down the road. And so, you know, I would say to maybe get in that habit of having an open conversation. I don't think you need to land on a specific number or anything, but
Right.
just get a sense of what they're going to offer and get rid of any potential hurdles up front. And the feedback that we often get, or at least that I've gotten from candidates, is that, you know, the offer process isn't a fun thing to go through, right? For the most part, you're negotiating, it's a bit uncomfortable at times. I've even had candidates say, you know, the worst part is over now once you get past that. And you could tell how uncomfortable they get at times. You know, some people are okay with it, others don't love it, right? So if you have those communications prior to the offer stage and you get to a better place early on, it's a much more seamless process going through offer negotiations. And quite frankly, it won't be uncomfortable anymore. So
Yeah, that's great advice. And look, it's, you know, it's an emotional thing. You're talking about, you know, this is your livelihood, this is your career, and everybody wants what's best for themselves and for their career and for their families and everything else. And we all get that, but you also want to do it with, you want to take the right approach. And this is a business transaction, and you're being observed in that business transaction. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, and you mentioned the word rescind, right? That's a scary word. People know what that means. And I've seen people talk their way out of a job. I've seen people over negotiate. So, and I know you have too. So let's talk about that. I mean, how easy is it for somebody to blow it if they over negotiate?
yeah, it's a great question. As you can imagine, I've had many examples like this where it got close. Luckily, only a few that actually got to that point. I would say that the most important part about that is to really try to understand where the other party is starting to get a little bit uncomfortable and where it's just not happening. You know, if an employer tells you a few times that they're not able to do something, they're telling you that for a reason, right? But also, you know, going back to the piece about being reasonable about your asks, you know, you really need to get an understanding of what is reasonable and what's not. We've had people come in, ask for things that are the standard, right? You know, hey, I currently have this expense that my current employer covers for me. Can you do the same? Right? That's a reasonable ask. I've also had people get to a point where you align on everything in the offer, and then out of nowhere they're asking you to cover the relocation expenses for, you know, them and somebody else in their family or what have you. These are just very specific examples, and I think that you just have to use your best judgment and know when to back off. And honestly, it just comes back to not getting too greedy. So
Yeah.
you got to know the market data, you know, generally what the role pays, you know, for the position that you've gotten an offer for. And if you're asking for something that's 20,000, 30,000 above that, there's a good chance that the employer is going to say, sorry, we can't meet
Yeah.
that. You know, so here's what I would say.
Yep.
You're putting yourself in a tough position when you over ask, because what are you going to do when they come back and say, we can't even meet you in the middle? And then you come back and accept an offer that was significantly less, right? It kind of, you know, shows how greedy you were being. So it opens up a can of worms. But yeah, I mean, I think it's usually the greed that gets you to that point as an employer where you just decide to walk away and rescind.
That's, I mean, it's great guidance in really being careful in not only how you handle the situation, but how you transact business. Again, I keep coming back to that. Be careful how you transact business. Pick up signals from the employer. Ask questions so that you know what you could probably push for and what you shouldn't be pushing for. So if you ask the right questions, you're positioning yourself into the right negotiation tactic. You'll know, okay, based upon what I'm asking, I could probably push for this, but I probably can't push for that because I already told me it's not going to be possible. For example, vacation time. This comes up all the time. Someone says, I get 4 weeks of vacation a year now. And the offer letter came in, it only has 3 weeks of vacation. And they say to us as the agency, can you go back and try to negotiate the 4th week of vacation? Well, as you know, it's sometimes a policy in an organization where HR comes back and they say, we can't do it because if we give that person an extra week of vacation, we got to give everybody an extra week of vacation. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, I've had quite a bit. I will tell you that, you know, the vacation policies across all industries now are being looked at heavily because of, you know, just having to be competitive in the market, right? And so that is something that is very important to the younger generations now. Yeah. And I know it's a strong negotiating point. So our stance, or at least my experience, has shown me that it's critical, but there are companies that are standing by their policy no matter what, right? And absolutely no exceptions. And so, you know, again, it kind of goes back to getting those expectations set earlier than later. You know, if that's really important to you, have that conversation earlier on. But it is not unreasonable to see an employer say no to that. I've seen it many times. However, there are situations where they can flex to some degree. So it all depends on the organization. You know, I'll handle it a bit differently.
So I guess moral of the story is ask very tactfully and put it out there and see if it's something that can happen. And one of the things I also encourage people to do is if you are working with a third-party recruiting firm, an agency, and you have somebody representing you, use that person to negotiate on your behalf. Utilize their expertise. Chances are they've probably been working with the company for many years or for enough time where they can give you some guidance. But to what you're saying, Anthony, ask tactfully, but just be aware that some companies have a policy for this and it might not really be negotiable. It might just be a policy. What else? Because there's a couple of things I want to talk about specific to the job offer, but real quick, what's typically negotiable? So you get the offer comes in, what would you say is typically negotiable?
Yeah, so I think for things that are negotiable, it really comes down to a base salary, right? That's the most usual. Bonus targets, very rarely, right? Because bonus targets are typically tied to a specific role and a grade level within an organization. The only place where you may see, not the only, but for the most part, is the smaller companies, right? Your startups, where they've just started designing their benefits and total rewards packages. They're so small that they can sort of go through an adaptation phase where they're tweaking things every so often. In larger organizations, which, you know, many people in pharma are currently employed by, you do not have that type of flexibility, right? So bonuses, when somebody tells you within HR can't negotiate the bonus, you know, 99.9% of the time they're telling you the truth there. I mean, look, there's a lot of things that I think can be negotiable, but you don't know until you don't ask. But again, it goes back to the size of the company. I really do believe that's a strong indicator of how flexible they're willing to be. PTO, we just talked about it, right? That is something that could potentially be negotiable. Sign-on bonuses, right? That is the one thing that I think most candidates are wondering when they go into the process, right? How much is this employer willing to cover for me if I get an offer, because I'm walking away from an annual bonus, maybe some other incentives or compensation that will be paid out to me, but that I'm going to lose if I leave them today. And so sign-on bonuses are interesting in that some companies will only cover what you're actually losing, right? And you have to show them documentation to prove that. But there also is a tactic where sign-on bonuses come into play just to sweeten the deal, right? And
Yeah.
we often see that. So I'm not saying that every company is going to do that, but if that is important to you and you need that money to cover something, maybe some losses by leaving your current employer, that is certainly something I would negotiate and something I would be prepared, right, with. And I would gather whatever documentation you can to prove what you're walking away from.
So let's talk about that, because I had on my list, this is a big section to talk about, because sign-on bonuses, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what they are. Some people just think that they join a company and they're going to get a sign-on bonus. And some people deserve a sign-on bonus because they're walking away from a lot in order to accept the position. So let's talk about, when do you see sign-on bonuses being used? Do all companies provide sign-on bonuses? And what information should someone prepare in order to justify a sign-on bonus?
Yep, all great questions. So I think for the question about, when you can expect one or when a company can cover it, I mean, it sometimes is tied to the role, right? There's grade levels within an organization. Sometimes they'll sort of start the sign-on bonuses at a specific level or role within the organization. Most companies issue sign-on bonuses based on what you're leaving behind, right? So to cover your losses or to make you whole is the term we usually use. There are going to be companies that use it as a tactic to close you, right? So let's say you get an offer for $100,000 and you were asking for $115,000. Well, maybe they'll give you $15,000 because they can't make up that other $15K with the salary for whatever reason, right? It's probably just above their range for the role. So I see that play sometimes, right? So it really all depends on the company and their philosophy. Every company has a different compensation philosophy and how they're going to approach offers and be competitive. And that's just how it is. So I wouldn't expect anything when you go into an employer or go into an interview and speak with like a recruiter about it. But I would ask the question, what is your philosophy? Can I expect to have something covered? When it comes to preparing for it, right? Let's say you're losing $50,000, half of it's long-term incentives, half of it's your annual bonus for half the year, right? You're leaving in the summer, you're going to lose half the year's bonus if you walk away today. You want to get whatever documentation you can from your current employer to prove that, that indeed is your target bonus or bonus that you expect to be paid, right? And usually, it's a PDF format or whatever you can gather to show the employer. And that's if they request it, right? I mean, most companies will request it. Very rarely will you get them just taking your word for it. So I would just go in and sort of collect whatever you can to be ready to prove whatever you're walking away from.
Right. So you're showing them, okay, my bonus is 20% and my salary is 100,000. So I'm expecting 20,000. I'm leaving in, let's just say I'm leaving in August. So I'm going to walk away from 8 months of bonus. So I want to be compensated and made whole for the amount that I'm not going to be getting for next year. But then the other side of it is you have maybe a long-term incentive. So let's say you have some kind of stock plan that you're involved in. And if you leave the company, you're no longer going to be eligible or be able to exercise the stock that you have. So my question is, and we run into this all the time, we typically ask candidates for documentation to show what that number is. And what we look for is what is vested. So what do you already have? And what's going to vest next? So we need a vesting schedule. We need to see the number of shares we have, and we need to figure out a quantity of what it is that you're actually walking away from. So in your experience, if I show that, and it says that someone's walking away from, right now it's $20,000, but in 4 months from now, another amount vests, and it's going to be, they're going to be walking, it's another $10,000. They're going to be walking away from, $30,000, whatever. So what do you see in the industry as far as what will companies typically consider? Because if it's 2 years out and your next vest is 2 years away, You didn't even really earn that money yet. Hasn't happened because you haven't been there 2 years, number one. Number two, how do you know what it's worth? The share price is going to vary tremendously in that 2 years. So what do you base it on? So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. This is what I would call the most complex part of the offers, is when you get to the long-term incentives, which is a typical part of the compensation package in pharma, right? So
Yep.
Used to negotiating a lot of these. Every company's different when it comes to this. And again, it goes back to the philosophy. So when you look at the vesting dates, you're going to see what you're leaving behind and how far out, right, that is going to vest. So some companies may look at the next 12 months and say, hey, you have $10,000 the next 12 months. We'd like to give you $10,000 up front, or maybe we'll give you $10,000 in stock up front that vests in 1 year. Maybe they'll put it on the exact same schedule, right, that you're leaving behind. Maybe someone looks 2 years out, or in some cases, depending on how competitive a company is, they might say, great, it vests in 3 years. Well, we're now going to just replace that all right now today. Maybe that is a huge incentive to close a candidate and really sweeten the deal. So I've seen it all when it comes to that. When it comes to proving it, right, you may have to do a little bit of a deep dive in like an E-Trade account or a Fidelity account and show those specific dates. We often will see documentation that looks much different than what we need to really fully analyze that. So again, you may have to really dive deep to show the right documentation. What I would say, generally about stocks and really viewing like what that value is, right? I know you said that it is really tough when you look at those. They're overwhelming statements. If you're not really strong in finance and the numbers are a bit confusing to you, I would have someone else take a look at it for you. To really help you understand, because I've had candidates have no idea, right? Send in a document and they couldn't even tell you what number it is. They
don't even know what they have.
Yeah,
they don't. Negotiating.
And it's extremely important, right? Because it's all about what you communicate. So if you don't fully understand what you're leaving behind, how are you going to negotiate?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So I partner with whoever you can, a friend, maybe someone in industry that can understand that. Maybe it's an accountant, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Financial advisor. And then the options are the trickiest one, right? So restricted stock is something we often see. That is a little bit more straightforward, right? Because it's full shares of stock. They always hold some sort of value as long as they're not zero in the stock market. But when you get to options, that is one that, unless they're above water, as we call it, and they actually hold value and they've increased in share price, a lot of options go below, right?
Yeah.
What you receive them at. So in that case, a lot of equity we see is actually not worth anything at that time, but we'll have candidates say, well, this is the potential of it. And unfortunately, most organizations will perceive that as something that doesn't hold value and they can't make you whole on it. But again, it could be negotiated. Maybe there's a middle ground there, but that is something that I would advise people get a little bit more educated on if they're not already, which is the difference between the options and the RSUs.
Well, just to recap and kind of close out this part of the conversation, I think when it comes to this piece of it, number one, you're going to see a big variation depending on level. When we see executive level packages, a lot of times companies will be more aggressive in what they will consider something that they're gonna provide a sign-on bonus for. In lower level positions, I think it's going to be difficult for them. So, for example, they're not going to pay out a stock vest that's 2 years away or 3 years away. Typically, what we can see is that if you can prove that you have shares that are going to vest within the next 6 months, we can make an argument, because it's like, hey, I'm here at this company now. I want to leave and I want to join your company. But if I do that, in 6 months from now, I would have $25,000. And the company might look at that and say, well, we don't want you to lose $25,000. It's 6 months away. You almost have it. We're going to incorporate maybe a piece of it or the whole thing into the offer package as a sign-on. And then we're going to, quote unquote, make you whole. So that's what I just wanted to point out as far as what your expectations should be as it relates to this piece of it. If it's a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, I don't think most companies are going to want to consider that, but you never know. It's worth asking. So let's shift gears a little bit. A lot of times you get these offer letters and it says the term at will employment. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I simply put, right, I'm not a lawyer, and I know there's a million different cases of this and people battle that term, but what it means at the end of the day is that the employer or the employee can terminate that agreement at any point, right?
Okay.
I mean, that is it simply put. So you can walk away, right? Many people do at any given time. They go work for another employer. Or if the employer needs to, for whatever reason, they can terminate that agreement. I mean, that is it in a nutshell, right? And I know there's some nuances to it, but something that is important and that you should see in every offer letter, or typically.
Yeah. It protects everyone.
Right.
What about, and let's talk about non-competes and non-solicitation agreements. So a lot of times you might get an offer, and sometimes in the offer, there'll be language that talks about non-compete or non-solicitation. So let's start with, what's the difference between the two of those?
Yeah, really good question. I deal with this heavily in the commercial space, right? Because when you're out there selling a product or supporting a product that has, of course, competition in pharma, these languages will be built in to an offer letter to protect the company, quite frankly, right? And so not every company has them, but many do. Non-competes typically mean that if you were to leave that employer that you're with currently and go to work for another company that is competing, typically within that specific space, they will have terms associated with that, right? So it may, for example, it may limit you for the next 12 months after leaving them from working in that area. You actually have to go outside of that area. Let's say the terms say, you can't work within cystic fibrosis for the next year. If you go and sign a contract or, go to work for another company and you're going to support a competing product in that space, that's what a non-compete would limit you from doing. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's just one example. So it really comes down to competing against your current employer, right? If you were to leave them one day. The terms, again, the terms can vary. Non-solicits a bit different. Non-solicits really deal with, you typically will deal with the inability to go and, let's say, recruit people or, poach people, right, is typically the term we use, and really take people from their previous employer. So, example is person leaves company A to go to company B, and then they're calling all their friends at company A to come work for them on this new team. Right. So it could be like a sales leader goes and tries to poach all their old sales reps out in the field to come work for them at this new company. And so a non-solicit typically would stop somebody from doing that within a certain length of time. What I typically see is about 12 months in most of those agreements.
Got you.
All right.
And that's also, I've seen it called a no harvest agreement. It's pretty much the same thing.
I'm not as familiar with that term, but the advice I would give, because I've gotten into some interesting discussions, a lot of back and forth on specific terms in an offer letter. And often candidates will ask us within HR and even the recruiter specifically for advice on what they should do, right? And that is advice we can't give. So I would tell any candidate to speak with a lawyer that they know or somebody who is very knowledgeable on the subject to give them guidance, right? So if someone came to me as, let's just say somebody wanted to join the company I was working for, and they were asking about terms in their current non-compete, that is something we can't advise on. And really, we can advise on our own terminology. We would, of course, push that to maybe a legal team to, to have them look at the terms and kind of interpret them. But usually it has to be their own, party on their side, like a third party that is giving them guidance. I would urge people to pay really close attention to their contract with their current employer so that they fully understand the circumstances that will be once they leave.
Well, they vary so much.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand, a lot of times you look at the language, it's kind of hard to understand what the company is saying you can't do.
Right.
So it's really important, I think, to get an attorney. That's great advice. And have the attorney tell you, the company is saying you can't do this, whatever that is.
Yeah.
But let me ask you, how often do you see these enforced?
So I would say in pharmaceuticals, it is very much something that you're going to see often, whether it be non-compete or non-solicit or both. They're going to be specific to certain things, right? Like I said, it could be an entire therapeutic area. It could be a specific disease state. Really depends on what the language says. Companies vary greatly when it comes to dealing with these situations. I have heard stories of certain companies never looking at them, and so you never have to worry. And I've heard horror stories where they go after every person that they think may have broken the agreement.
Yeah.
So that is why it is so important to be well educated on what you're signing and fully understanding what you can and can't do when you leave that employer.
Right.
So I think just educating yourself as best as possible and being aware of what the terms say is really critical. But again, it depends. It really depends on the employer.
No, it's great advice. And so listen, real quick before we finish, because this is great information, and we could keep talking for another hour, but in the interest of time, what other red flags are there out there? What other advice do you have for folks that are considering a job offer, whether it's before they get the offer or whether they have it, or in the future if they need to look into one?
So I think it goes back to the experience that you have. And I do feel strongly about this, obviously being in HR and talent acquisition. I think we do represent typically the culture of the company. And so when you're dealing with the hiring manager and the recruiter and anybody else up front, I would just look out for the way that they're interacting with you.
Yeah.
Right. I know this is very philosophical, but I do believe in it. And I feel like as long as you think you're being treated fairly and people are doing the right thing for you and trying to help you along the way and giving you, reasonable guidance, that is what you should be expecting. But if you're getting folks that are pushing you to do things, making you feel uncomfortable, trying to close you really quickly on an offer without thinking about you and your situation and giving you a reasonable amount of time, right, to think about an offer. To me, those are what I would call old school tactics. I like to think that we've come a long way and kind of away from some of those tactics, because I think the candidates deserve to be treated with a little bit more respect. And
Sure.
We have to realize that they have a personal life. They are currently employed by somebody else usually. And so we want to respect that. So again, I go back to how you're being treated along the way.
Well, and I think to add to that, to jump on, pay close attention to how you're being treated by who. So if you're getting treated poorly by HR, no offense, Ant, you're HR. If you're getting treated poorly by the person in HR, but the hiring manager's lovely and the hiring manager's doing an amazing job and you really hit it off with that person, there's great dialogue, great communication, and you really want to work for that person, but you're not getting treated well by, it might just be a personality thing from the HR side. And you're not going to be reporting to the person in HR, you're going to be reporting to the hiring manager. So I just want to caution people not to make snap decisions as it relates to that, depending on how you're being treated by whom, because I think that that's a big part of it. But you're right. I think a lot of times if you get a bad vibe from an organization from the get-go, just the way they handle everything, maybe they're lowballing you or they're painting you into a corner, or they're just not taking into consideration that you have the right to make the decision for you and for your career and for your family, and all of a sudden you're a commodity. Well, that would give me reason to pause.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tom. So what I would say is look for patterns, right? So you're right. I mean, people are human. You might catch a person on a bad day where maybe they didn't treat you great, but everyone else has been great too, including the hiring manager, which you're right. That is ultimately going to be the person that can kind of shape your experience at the company, right? And who you're going to be dealing with most often. So you are 100% right. I wouldn't make quick judgments on that. I would look for patterns if you're finding that a majority of the people that you're communicating with along the way aren't very pleasant or not treating you the way you think you should be treated. that would cause me to, kind of throw up the red flag.
Or if the whole process is a nightmare from beginning to end, if interviews keep getting canceled, the hiring manager doesn't have time, you get rushed through things, they don't show up, the hiring manager's always late, and you don't have they're not giving you the ability to ask questions. Like, these are nuances that you have to pay attention to, because if this is the culture, or what you're getting as a feel for the way the culture is and the way they feel is an acceptable way to do business, again, transact business on their side, well, then that might not change when you get there.
Yeah, and typically it does not, right? And that's
all right. We'll leave it at that. Hey, listen, man, I'm really grateful that we took the time to do this. You're awesome. This was really helpful. I learned a lot, and I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, Tom. I'm happy to come back anytime and hit on some other topics. I'm sure we could have sat here for about 5 hours. So.
I'm taking you up on that. All right, buddy.
Sounds
Have
good.
a great day. Thanks again.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe so that you don't miss episodes in the future, and feel free to leave a rating or a review or a comment. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.